Successful software development startup. My name is Kyle Simmons. I'm here with Molly Schrader, who has gone through a co-creation rapid ideation session with MentorMate. So she's going to be talking about her experience later in the program, but I'll let her just introduce herself before. So,
hi, my name is Molly Schrader, and I am the Executive Director of Summit for the EdTech team. And we are an organization that produces technology education events to try to inspire and empower teachers to increase their use of Google Apps for Education, other emerging technologies. And so we put on about 100 conference types events every year, and we're just in the middle of working with MentorMate on a new project. So here to share our process with you.
And like I said, my name is Kyle Simmons. I'm a solutions architect with MentorMate. I have been doing software development and solutions architecture for around 5 years now, so I'm excited to tell you all about our process, our co-creation process that we call rapid ideation. In brief about MentorMate, before we get started, MentorMate is a global software development company. We do everything from soup to nuts, so we help clients and partners who need help at the front end of things with the consulting side of their projects, with design and consulting and the technical architecture, all the way through to we help with actual development of projects and deployment and ongoing maintenance. So we do everything in-house, which is a little unique. But enough about MentorMate. What we want to talk to you today about is rapid ideation. So our agenda is what is rapid ideation. We're going to highlight some of the questions and process for identifying scope, talk about who needs rapid ideation, and then we're actually going to get into running a rapid ideation session and what are some of the tips and advice so that you can do this on your own. So we help people and we do facilitate these sessions and these engagements for our clients, but maybe you want to do this internally and you just want to take some of these recommendations and actually use them at your own company. So that's what we're going to dig into that, and then we're going to talk about the output and some of the deliverables that come from rapid ideation engagements, and then we'll move on and talk with Molly a little bit more. So how can we scope the development project if we don't yet understand the problem? Everyone wants to know, how much is something going to cost? How long is it going to take? And what exactly am I going to get? Those are kind of the three core questions that most people want answered, not only with software projects, but with any sort of initiative at your business. And the rapid ideation engagement and these sessions help answer those questions. But what we do first, and maybe what's more important than answering those questions, is figuring out the problems and who's affected by those problems that are driving your need for some sort of a solution. You'll hear me talk a lot. We focus on the scope, the timeline, and the budget. And we're going to keep coming back to those things because rapid ideation sessions can, when applied properly, can help determine and answer those questions while also addressing and figuring out what the problems are that are creating these situations. So what is rapid ideation? There are several different approaches and methodologies that you can take when it comes to software development. Two of the most common, and one you hear about right now, is called Agile methodology. MentorMate is a company that employs Agile methodology, and what that basically means is that you start out and you break off your work into small chunks, and you set out at the beginning of what we call a sprint, and you bite off a work, and then at the end of your sprint, you talk about what you did, and you plan your next sprint. And there's really no long-term preparation with an Agile process. The alternative to that, the other end of the spectrum, is what we call waterfall. And what that is preparing everything up front. So that is fully scoping out your entire product at the beginning, and then once you have scoped it all out, going through the development process and seeing that and making that a reality. Now, there are pros and cons to both, but what we've found is that while the Agile process is great for the actual development and transparency during development of products, it doesn't often provide the answers that we need, those 3 core answers of how long is something going to take, what is it going to cost, and what exactly are you going to get. It doesn't provide those answers. Where waterfall does provide those answers, but the problem with waterfall is you can't pivot rapidly enough in case technology changes or you find out new things about your users. So rapid ideation is this kind of middle ground where we do 20% of the work to get 80% of the results. So it's a collaborative process where we bring everyone in the same room and we talk about business needs, user perspectives, goals, scope, and we spend a very concerted short amount of time to get to 85% of that scope so that we can then have a better understanding of what that first phase of development looks like. It's important to note that a rapid ideation engagement or sessions are not very good at scoping out and defining the second, third, fourth phases of work. Rapid ideation is very good at identifying the first, this MVP, this minimum viable product, and answering those 3 questions about the MVP. And then once you've developed and deployed the MVP, then what you do is you wash, rinse, repeat, and you do the rapid ideation again. It'll probably be a little bit quicker the second and third time around, but then you know a lot more, and you can go through this iterative process where you do rapid ideation, develop and deploy, rapid ideation on the new feature set, the new phase, develop and deploy, and you keep going like that. So rapid ideation is very good at identifying the scope. So oftentimes at the beginning of these sessions, teams will come together and they will have grand ideas of all of the things that they want to have put into their app. And oftentimes the big ideas are phases 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. They're way down the road. And rapid ideation is very good when you have a good facilitator and when you have people who have their scope stick out. It's very good at limiting and identifying that scope for that first phase of your development. We'll talk a little bit later about this, but what's important is to identify things as they come up as whether or not they're in scope for that MVP or whether or not they are out of scope for the MVP. And even if things are out of scope, it's important to still write those down, because once they're written down and everyone can see that they're written down, they're out of your head, and you can start to move on to things that are more important to the MVP. Continuing at a high level, rapid ideation is rapid. So about the quickest we can get through an ideation session or an ideation engagement would be 4 weeks. But typically they run maybe 4 to 8 weeks, but it allows us to discover, define, and design the first phase, that first MVP of a project. Rapid ideation is not a one-size-fits-all tool or process. It is right-sized for every different client. So you might have a situation where you're trying to get internal buy-off. Maybe you have a product team and you need to get buy-in and budget from people higher up in your organization. You could use a rapid ideation project to develop design, assets, maybe some estimates. You could answer those 3 questions, those 3 core questions, and then take that to your internal team to get buy-in and budget. You might also want to validate an idea in the marketplace. You could use rapid ideation to develop a clickable prototype that you could then go and have user testing done on. Maybe you have an idea that needs to integrate with an existing tool. You could use rapid ideation to do that exploration and how that technical integration is actually going to take place. So it is a quick process, but it is not a one-size-fits-all. What we really need to do is tailor it towards the specific client. So I talked a little bit about who needs rapid ideation, but more specifically, Rapid ideation engagements can be great for startups. So someone who has an idea and they just don't know what it's actually going to take to get this thing off the ground. So it's rapid ideation engagements, and these workshops are a great way to dig into it for a short period of time and figure out quickly how long is it going to take, what's it going to cost, and what are you going to get. Maybe there's a project team internally that wants to develop a new feature or a new project for your company. You could use rapid ideation to get consensus, or again, maybe get some budget secured or get approval from the decision makers in your company. Additionally, if you have an existing software team, maybe you just don't have the bandwidth to pull off some of your team to do this type of an exploration. So it's a great way to do something very quickly, and you can pull in key team members and then determine whether or not it's technically a sound approach or identifying the best approach for your technology solution. And then lastly, one of the things that I like most about rapid ideation engagement, specifically with MentorMate, is that it's an easy way for new clients to test out a relationship with our company. So, and this could be true with other companies as well. Instead of going into a situation where it's a year-long process and you have the full development costs, which could be several tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, rapid ideation is a quick way to kind of test the waters and see if this is a good working relationship, and see how your two organizations, whether or not they have synergies at all. So it's a good way to test new partners, but also get internal alignment. It's good for large companies, small companies. So it's good all around. Some of the benefits, more specifically, some of the benefits of the rapid ideation are that you can explore new ideas. So when you're in a setting where everyone has an open mind, you can kind of go down these rabbit holes, and it's better to go down these rabbit holes now and early in the process than 6 months into development, where you have to switch gears completely and you are at risk of throwing off your project. So you can kind of explore, you can go down these rabbit holes. Maybe it's a 10-minute discussion, maybe it's an hour-long discussion, but it's better to do that up front than, like I said, during development. It's also great for getting a shared understanding and alignment between all parties of an organization or of a product, so that in consensus and you can move forward and hopefully not have any political roadblocks that are stopping you in the future. The other thing that I like the best is about these engagements is that you can ask very basic questions that are maybe assumptions that go unquestioned, but when you bring out an outside voice or outside eyes or internal eyes, you can question everything, and so you can not take everything at face value, and you can really start to question whether or not the way that you're doing things currently is correct, and whether your assumed solution is the best route as well. And then lastly, some of the benefits are actually defining the solution. So you can actually spell out exactly what you're going to do, whether it's through visuals or a technical map or through some sort of analysis document. You can actually better define, and then that helps bring everyone on board as well. So there are a lot of benefits to this kind of very quick, very rapid, do 20% of the work to get 80% of the results, that marriage between agile and waterfall. So we've talked very high level about rapid ideation, and hopefully you are all on board and you think that it's a great idea and you want to get started. So how do you get started? I'll give you a little history about MentorMate and how we got started. So we had a lot of clients and potential clients coming to us And they often would have a sketch or a design, or maybe they have a technical requirements document, and they would come to us and they would say, how much does it cost to build this, and how long is it going to take, and what exactly am I going to get? And we would go and we would set out to estimate that product. And what we were finding is that when we didn't have the opportunity to fully vet everything and ask those basic questions and explore all the different rabbit holes, what ended up happening was that we were giving estimates that weren't quite as accurate as they could be, because we just didn't ask some of those basic questions up front. So what we slowly started to do over the years was refine this process so that when clients come to us, we are able to more quickly vet and step on some of those rakes early on in the process so that we don't run into them during development. So it was a very organic process that we've matured over the years, and hopefully what you can learn from us and take this internally, or use a partner to do this as well. So the first thing, now that you've decided that you want to do your rapid ideation engagement and you're ready to go, the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you bring all of the important members of the product or project into the room, potentially at the same time, or at least for some different sessions. So that could be people from marketing, from technology, from sales. Maybe you have some C-level presence in the meetings. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you have a real estate app that you're building. You might want to have one rapid ideation engagement, because you could have several engagements, maybe like a half-day engagement. So you could have several of them. For one engagement, you could bring in C-level employees that you're doing more discovery. What are the success metrics? What are they expecting? You could have another session that is with real estate agents. How do they currently use technology? How would they like to use technology? What are the tools they're currently using? You could bring in customers for a third session. Talk to them about what their expectations are, what tools they're currently using. You could have a technology session, but it's important that you get everyone involved, because the worst thing that you could have happen is that you go through this whole intense process where you've had hours of meetings, and you get to the end of your 4 or 6 week engagement, and you go and you show this around the company, and a department that has an influence on this, or has some say, raises their hand and brings up something that you hadn't thought of before, and they put the kibosh on the whole deal. So to avoid that, it's important to bring all the people into the same room and have their voice early on, so that you can ensure that those political roadblocks don't come up later in the process. Additionally, that is from your side of the team, but from a technology standpoint, it's important that you have this trinity of software development represented in the meeting. Someone from a user experience or a design standpoint, someone who is more high-level strategy and can see the vision and understands the business side of things a little bit better and understands your business, as well as a technical architect, or someone who can really dig into the weeds and talk to you more about and explain more of the technical nuances of your project. So it's important to bring everyone and get everyone involved in the process. Next, now that you have everyone identified, you've got all of your stakeholders who are going to play all of the key roles, you've got them all identified, the next thing that you want to do is you want to have a brief session, a brief meeting before your ideation sessions, where you can determine what are the outcomes that you'd like to get from this engagement. What specific deliverables do you want? Do we need estimates, designs, a clickable prototype, a technical diagram? What are the things that you actually want to get out of the session? Then, in preparation, you'll also want to go and look and see what other people are doing. We have a lot of clients who come in and have great ideas, but they haven't done much research on what people are doing. And so that is an important, that's an important step, because users are accustomed to the popular apps, and they are accustomed to a very good experience. So even though you might not be competing with Facebook and Google and Amazon directly, that's what users are. That's what users are used to. So if you are creating an e-commerce site, even though you might not compete with Amazon, they have Amazon as that experience that they are used to. So you do want to scope the competitive landscape and see what your competitors are doing and what users are doing, and which tools they're using, to make sure that you're able to come out with the most compelling product and the most compelling solution out of the engagement. Piggybacking on that, identify existing research, and then, if necessary, or if you'd like to, some clients also like to do surveys, focus groups, data analysis. They go through and they make sure that they've looked at all of the relevant data. The one thing that I would advise against, because this is a rapid ideation, the intent is to go quick, and once you're through the process and you've developed it, you iterate on that, and you iterate, and you're always getting user feedback on live tools. So don't spend too much time getting surveys and focus groups and data, because you could spend a whole year gathering data and doing these surveys, and what would have been probably better is if you would have had 2 or 3 releases in that same amount of time, and you'd know a lot more about your users and what they actually want, had you just gone ahead and moved forward. So I'm not saying move forward with reckless abandon and disregard all data out there, but there's a fine balance between an appropriate amount of data and timeline for data collection and going too far overboard. So now that you've done your preparation, you've identified your people, you've done your preparation, and now you're actually into these rapid ideation sessions. So stepping back a bit, rapid ideation sessions, like I've said, are typically 4 to 6 hours in length, with all the people in the same room, or important people in the same room who have a say about the product. These sessions, if you're going to do multiple, probably don't do them back to back. Don't do one in the morning and one at night, because your brain will be absolutely mush by the end of the first session. So give yourself some time in between the sessions to digest things, sleep on it, and come back refreshed to sessions 2 and 3. If you have time, a day, maybe 2 days in between sessions should suffice. If you're traveling for the sessions, maybe go 2 mornings, morning, and that will hopefully allow you to stay fresh. So once you're in your meetings, I cannot stress enough the importance of going through and identifying what are the actual needs, what are the problems that you're facing right now, and what are the things that you want to get out as a business from this tool and this solution. So be sure to spend at least an hour talking about your needs and the goals for the project. Then move in on a second hour, start talking about the users, who they are, what they do, what they like, what they see. Start talking about that experience for them. And this is a great time in hours 2, 3, 4. This is when you start to do more brainstorming activities and prioritization activities. And we'll get into that in a slide here in a minute. So spend the first hour identifying those needs. Really dig into all those things. Are your needs really your needs, or are they just superficial and you could dig deeper? Then you move into, okay, what are some feature ideas? And let's start to explore those. Let's go down these rabbit holes that we've been talking about. Are these features MVP, or are they future phase? Then you start grouping your like features together. Okay, these all kind of seem similar. Can we combine some things? And then your 4th hour, your last hour, is prioritizing these things. So which ones are most important? So some of the things that you might want to look into those 2nd, 3rd, and 4th hours are collaborative sketching, guided brainstorming, voting processes. With Molly and Ed Tech team, we did kind of a fun voting process where we used Monopoly money, that we'll talk about that in a minute. Do some road mapping. What is in phase 1? What's in phase 2? What's in phase 3? There's another thing called empathy mapping, where you try to get into the brain of your user. What do they see? What do they think? What do they feel? And you really start to feel where they're coming from, because it's important to understand their perspective, because if you only build something that solves your business need without ever taking into account the user's perspective, it's likely that your product will not be as compelling for your users. So at MentorMate, we actually always say business needs from a user's perspective. So keep that in mind. But I posted a link here on the screen, gamestorming.com. It's a site that's got a lot of different games and activities and ideas for prioritizing, for drawing out and getting people to work together, whether it's ice breaking, getting to know you, road mapping. So go check that out. It's a great resource for helping you find activities for your session. So a few key things for best practices. When you go into your meetings, make sure you have an agenda. So you've got these 2 or 3 half-day sessions lined up. Make sure you have an agenda for those and stick to that agenda. Let everyone know that there is a path, and this is a known and a facilitated workshop, and we are going to cover on these 4 things. And if you're spending too much time on something that isn't actually moving the needle forward, you can actually pull yourself back to that agenda and keep things going. Set clear expectations for the next steps and deliverables. It is paramount that at the end of each session, you say, what are the next steps? Who's got action items? And what are we going to deliver? And what are we going to do over the next several weeks? Ensure that everyone understands the defined phases that you have for the work. So oftentimes phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, these ideas get thrown around a lot. Be sure that everyone understands what the MVP is, what the next phase is, what the phase after that is. And you don't have to define all those future phases, but just putting some guardrails around that so people can say, oh yeah, that feature, that's coming in phase 2. Which gets down to the number 4, write down out of scope tasks and write those down and put them into phases and bucket them off. But focus in your rapid ideation on the next upcoming phase. Oftentimes it's that MVP. As you're going, once you have a full whiteboard, take pictures of everything, all your notes, your drawings. Once you've finished your meeting, set a cadence. We like to do them weekly here, so that even if there's nothing to talk about or really big updates, set a regular cadence for your meeting to get forward, to touch base and just say, okay, so we all got together, the meetings were great, here's what we've been working on this past week, here's our progress. Maybe you don't have much to talk about, but at least everyone can get together and ask questions and know that the project is still moving forward. Some of those update meetings will have big deliverables, but it's a way to keep things on track and make sure that the stuff that you're working on is not totally out in left field and kind of off base. Lastly, establish a product owner, so someone who can speak for the product, so the person who actually calls the shots. You don't want to have too many people saying conflicting things, because then you'll end up in a situation where the product ends up in, people could have different ideas. So have a product owner, and then kind of similar to that, during your sessions, make sure that you have a facilitator, someone who is known that this is the person who's leading the meeting. You don't want to get into a meeting and everyone's like, all right, what do we do? Okay, I think we've got this agenda. Make sure that you have someone who's actually going to lead it and run it. And whether or not they're capable, you could have them participate and give feedback. Otherwise, you could have just an outside person make sure that you're staying on track and on schedule. So quickly about the outputs. At the end, you might, your outputs from this, depending on your project, you might want low fidelity wireframes. These could just be sketches. You could digitize these, but oftentimes low fidelity is just sketches. You could do a high fidelity wireframes. These are still wireframes. There's a little color in there, but they're annotated. We've got some some annotations on the side there, but they're starting to get into what that look and feel of the project is. You might need pattern research. What are other people doing? How do people actually, existing apps that are out there? So this could be a deliverable that you've gone out, you've done all this research, and you're seeing what other people are doing. This is common. Pattern research is common with B2C applications because you really want to hone in on what those users are using. We've also seen it. We're seeing it creep in more with B2B or actually B2E, like business to employee. So that the usability, because if you match how people are currently using their tools, if you can match that, then you can increase adoption and increase usage. There might also be user flows, screen or site maps. That could be an output. Potentially you could have some architecture, some technical architecture, which is explaining everything and how everything's going to work. We do these for almost every one of our rapid ideation engagements, so these are very important because screens are great, but you need to understand how the screens are working. The graphical user interface, you could start to get into some specifics on how the interactions with the application are going to work. So this is actually taking those high fidelity wireframes and actually showing some of the interactions and spelling out. This is great for getting buy-on and getting people excited about your final product. Additionally, for most of our rapid ideation engagements, we do some sort of an analysis or report that kind of puts it all together. There's a recap of what we learned in our sessions, the scope, estimates, and then that takes us right into estimates as well, because ultimately, at the end of the day, once we're all said and done, we want to know, for the MVP, how long is it going to take, what's it going to cost, and what are you specifically going to get? And so the estimate is one of the big things that we bring out, so that we can come forward and say, here's what it looks like, here's what it's going to do, and here's how long it's going to take and what it's going to cost. And once you take all these things and you put them together, you start to be able to get buy-in from people across the entire company. So they can use that or you can use that to get buy-in, to show customers, maybe generate some excitement, and then you can really start to zero in and move forward into development, because it really does set you up, put you on your best foot. Put your best foot forward going into development, so that you can actually move forward without too many hiccups or roadblocks that you haven't thought of. So, long story short, life is too short to build something that nobody wants, and that's kind of what we're trying to get out of these rapid ideation engagements, is do that 20% of the work that's going to get us 80% of the way there, and then we release, we get feedback from our clients and the users, and we wash, rinse, repeat, and we iterate through this process. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to take a peek at EdTech team. We'll talk to Molly. They went through a rapid ideation engagement. I'll let her explain their story, their situation a little bit more. But we're excited to have Molly here, because she is firsthand has gone through all of this.
Thank you.
So do you want to tell us a little bit, you kind of briefly told us about EdTech team, but tell us kind of how you got to the point where you realized we need help.
Great. So the EdTech team, again, my name is Molly, and the EdTech team is a company of mostly educators, and we put on conference-style events every week all around the world. So we have probably 100 and something events that happen every year, or every year. And what we have to do is we have to make a conference schedule for those. And so we've used, we really train a lot on Google Apps for Education. So we try to eat our own dog food by using the Google products to create our schedules and the websites for the events and registration and things. So we have a pretty cool process of the way that we've been doing it, but it became very clear to us that we needed a mobile solution. So what we were using worked fine for most of the computers, but it did not work well on mobile. So it didn't work well on the phones and on any iOS or tablets. And so we ended up kind of coming across the conference that MentorMate runs called MobCon. And as intrigued as I was with all of the sessions, I loved the conference schedule app. And so I looked at that and I did a little investigation as to who made the app and sort of came across MentorMate. So when we came to MentorMate, it was such a different experience than I was expecting, because we were coming in to potentially maybe buy a product, and what I found was a really customized solution to something that we could dream up a little bit more and add some of our process and creativity and sort of our features and desires to something that we already started with, which was your MVP of the conference app. So that's what we do. That's what my job is, to sort of oversee all the summits that happen, or the conferences, and try to improve the experience for not only our team, but also specifically the attendees that are at our conferences.
So it's maybe important to note at this point that, as I said earlier, rapid ideation sessions are right-sized for every client. And in the case of EdTech team, they came to us needing a conference application, which we had, and so we already had this kind of platform to work around. And we entered the rapid ideation thinking that we might use the MobCon application, but not really knowing. But that was kind of one of the unique things about the EdTech team ideation, is we had this starting point that was what was MobCon. How did you prepare? Or we talked a little bit about getting all the right people in the room and preparing for it and doing all these things beforehand. What were some of the things that you did? How did you choose who you wanted to be in the room? Because we had people travel, and so maybe you could talk a little bit about
that. So our company is based out in Irvine, California, but we have 29 people that live all around the world. And so when we were going to prepare for this rapid ideation, we decided we needed to get a couple different voices in the room, and we thought it was really important for them to be here in the room. We do a lot of mobile meetings and webinars like this, but we decided that it would be a really cool opportunity for us to meet together. So we did. We brought in people that were supposed to be on the schedule team. So those are the people that are creating the schedules every week. We brought on our chief innovation officer, so the person whose requirement of our team is to dream big. We brought in the global team so that we had a very good perspective of not just U.S.-based things, but what about time zones and different vacations and holidays and all those things. Our COO, which was kind of when you would say a technical person, he was sort of the technical lens of things. And then, of course, I was there as well as just sort of overseeing the big project. So and I think what was really fun is I didn't really prepare them very well for it, as I'm listening to this conference call about how we could have prepared a little bit better. But what we did know is that we were coming in to dream big, and we were in to be able to start thinking about what are some of the really cool things that we feel like we could enhance our users' experience. Yet we didn't have to be in charge of that process. You guys got to be sort of the facilitators and to keep us on that agenda and guiding the conversation towards what you would say, sort of that scope of something that's doable, that we could actually walk out of there and be on the same team.
Yeah, and so what was interesting was we did have all these different viewpoints, but can you talk a little bit about, at the end of day one, we did dream big. And then you came in on day two, and it was a different story. Can you talk about how you started dreaming big, and then it was actually sleeping on it, and you came in with a whole different viewpoint?
Yeah, I think our chief innovation officer sort of ruined the meeting pretty quickly by kind of having this really huge, grandiose idea that we all sort of were like, wow, we didn't even start thinking in that way. We came in thinking about a conference app, and so what he challenged us to do was to think differently about what we were doing. And so it was a lot of hard work, kind of thinking about what are our goals and what are the features that we want, what are the pain points that we're trying to solve. And I think after day one, we really had the space to sort of kind of come to a place of what were some big dream features and then what were some real practical things that we needed, a mobile solution to our conference app or to our conference schedule. And so I think after sort of, we went out for our sort of parking lot meeting after the ideation, in which you really start digging into what we learned. And I think we came back thinking there's a phase here. And so what we can do is we can start with one part, and then if we choose to, we can continue to build on that and get bigger. And we've got this cool lens of the way that we can look at it, but we really walked out of, or came back in, I think, day two with our heads down of we need to start somewhere, and this is the place that we're going to all start together.
Yep. And that was really cool because from my perspective as the person who was leading it, we did have very great ideas, but they were phase 2, 3, 4, and getting our clients to sometimes see that, no, let's start with that first step.
Yep.
Let's start with that MVP. That can be challenging, and you guys came in the next day and you had realized that was what you needed to do. So this is a little picture of the actual ideation in one of the boards that we had done. You can see our Wi-Fi password there if you're ever at our place. Talk about what the process where we did voting on the features, because there were a lot of feature ideas.
Yeah.
And so what was that process like?
Well, I think that's what we were all really excited about getting to, is what are the features? What is it going to look like? What do you want to click through? And I think what MentorMate did a great job is taking us a step back and saying, what are your goals? What are the pain points? And then really sort of drawing out what we did at this point. And what we did is, whenever we did goals and features, we'd sort of share with the whole group, and then we'd put envelopes up on the board, and we were each given an amount of Monopoly money, and you had to vote on what things were, the biggest pain points, or what things were your greatest features. And so what it did is it was a very visual representation of what a bunch of different opinions in the room could get to as being the number one pain point, or the number one thing we were trying to solve, or the greatest feature that we really wanted to make sure that the MVP had this, at least this, and then we could move towards these other things. So it really helped prioritize things in a very visual way, that there was group consensus in the room because we all had a process in voting. So I think it was a really cool, crystal clear way to be able to identify and then also move past.
Yeah. Going into the meetings, you talked a lot about wanting an e-commerce place where you could sell books and all these things from your speakers. And when we prioritized and we actually voted, that was not even on the priority. I mean, what became the priority was this agenda.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a really interesting thing as well. So coming out of the ideation sessions, we set out and we had our weekly cadence of meetings, and we worked on wireframes. What was it like when you first saw all the work that we had done actually now come together and be a product? Like what were some of the things that were going through your head, or did it make everything real, or?
So I loved the 2 days of ideation. I thought, or the rapid prototyping and the ideation, that was an incredible, exceeded expectations on one. But I would say the next part of what we had sort of signed up for that initial development with you was where we really knew that we wanted to work with MentorMate. Number one, when you were talking about the user flows and sort of the architecture, we really felt like you got our company and our process and the way that we did things. So that was a really big win for us, something that it sort of exceeded what we thought we were going to get out of it. And then to see all the wireframes and start really seeing a visual representation of what we had talked about, that really felt like we walked out of the room with something. And I would say the weekly meetings, we did a weekly meeting after the rapid ideation, for a few weeks before we even got to estimates or anything like that, that really just confirmed, I would say, the partnership part of it, and just the belief that we knew that we wanted to work with you. So it was so much fun to see it, and right from the get-go, we fell in love with the design style, and we loved everything that you were showing us. Had very little feedback, which is very rare for the group of people that we would bring in the room. So it just really confirmed that this was going to be something, and it was fun to sort of see a picture of what the ideas were in the room those couple days.
Very cool. So on the screen here, we'll show you. So we went from wireframes to now into some mobile designs of what the mobile app is going to look like. And this, interestingly enough, to your point about the not much feedback, I think what's maybe unique about your situation is that we got to a point where you kind of said, we don't really need much more beyond the wireframes. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing are you still happy with the feedback process of how you were? You didn't pivot much, but did you feel like you had that ability?
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like even the littlest tweaks, or can you make this map icon, even one of these map icons a little bit? The design process has been very back and forth. We've had a lot of meetings that we've been able to work with, and it was really a fun process of going through back and forth with the design team, with now the technical team, and now we're in the design sprint. So it feels like we are very involved in the process.
Yeah. This is maybe feeling like a big sales pitch for MentorMate right now, but
okay, I'll sell you.
I think the important part here is that these weekly check-in meetings are very, very important. So you do your ideation sessions, and then keep on this weekly, or if you want to do it every other week, these check-ins where you can actually see progress, because as Molly was talking about, they saw the progress, they were able to give feedback and say, we like this, we don't like that, and we're actually able to stay agile along and throughout the whole process. Were there any features that were conceptualized or talked about during ideation that you hadn't thought of before?
Well, I think that what we, like one of the things that you said for preparing for the meeting was to sort of see what were the other industry standards of what people had done. And so we'd been on conference calls with different scheduling apps, and we've looked at all the different ways of updating and all that, and nothing really sort of fit our needs. So when we started seeing conceptually what we had done in a very non-mobile format, I think MentorMate was able to guide us in sort of the great ways that you could structure it, and the menus and the navigation, and what one thing led to the next, and a little bit more of the use of it and then, you know, what's really unique about this one too is that there's a software behind it, and so there's a website and a web development that's actually happening at the same time. So maybe that significant interface between the two was something that of keeping databases and where is everything stored, and those things were probably a little bit more something new that came up through the ideation.
Was there anything about, you talked about you having a unique product that's got all these different things going on. Was there anything unique about the process that we went through that was kind of eye-opening, or about this whole rapid ideation engagement from start to finish? Was there anything unique about that you hadn't seen before or weren't expecting? And
oh yeah, I think the whole thing was unique. I think and listening to you sort of explain on this webinar of why you do the rapid ideation makes me think we would have been that exact use case of us going in and being like, can we buy this scheduling app from you? And then we would get it and we'd be like, well, this isn't exactly what we wanted. So you actually taking a look back and being like, well, what are your main, you know, features? What are your main pain points that you're trying to solve? What do you want the users to have for their interface? That was, I mean, that I think exceeded expectations, and just being able to really even take a step back and look at our process and see how we should do things differently, and for everybody in the room to understand the process of how it's going to move forward differently.
So you were the product owner for the product. I think one of the hardest things for clients is actually prioritizing features. Can you talk a little bit about how you went about prioritizing? Because if your list includes everything, you're effectively doing nothing, because it's going to cost too much and take way too long. So what was your thought process? Maybe this will help some people who are thinking about how do I prioritize these features.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we did, which Kyle has a screen about, is that what we wanted to do with our process is we really want it to be a personalized experience. And another thing that we wanted was we were really interested in some session feedback. And so those were, I would say, two things that we decided would be a huge value add going from our old system into the new system. So it was something that was already in MVP that we were looking at, was that there was some sort of session evaluation. I think we probably got to a more creative space of the ways that we wanted to evaluate those sessions, but also just the personalization of people being able to select their sessions and have a schedule that they would be able to refer to throughout the conference experience. That was something, those were some big features that we wanted to add, let alone just the fact that we needed it in a mobile experience so that people could, you know, have that mobile view as they're walking around the conference.
You kind of put on blinders and said, what we need at the very core is we need personalization and we need a schedule. And these are the core things that we need. Everything else is nice to have. Now, because we started at a certain point, there were all these things that were already included. But yeah, so that's interesting to hear, and I think that's a good takeaway. Is when you boil it all down, pick out your 2-3 big features that you have to have, and focus on those. And all of the extra bells and whistles, they can come later. And I think you guys did a very good job of that. And even when you talk about personalization, one of the things that we did was pull out photos.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that, because you actually personalizing it, but you also kept your eye on our business and how.
Yeah, well, our business is really about scalability, and so the ability for the schedule team to have to, I mean, we have 7 summits that are happening next weekend, and so to be tracking down so much information about every single speaker or event that we just sort of said, let's make some parts really easy and then really let it personalize for the attendee, the person that's going to come. So I think that was that, you know, we always just sort of had an eye on it too. And I just wanted to speak to some of the ways that we kind of viewed this phased approach, because when we did come in and talked about features, we had some pretty concrete things that we wanted to add into the app. So there were a couple things that when we got to the final process of the estimates, which is this great spreadsheet that really outlines the cost of every little different thing, when we got to that part of the rapid ideation and the estimates, we realized we had a budget, you know, and so how much is this going to cost, and we were able to prioritize some of the features based on money too. So there were some significant things that we could just say, let's pull that out and add that to the next phase if we continue to develop it, if we come back for another round of rapid ideation. So not only were we able to sort of think big, but we also got to plan out a lot and then sort of phase our approach based on the budget that we had and that we were willing to contribute to this first round of sort of this MVP. So I think having all those phases gives you an idea that, like, oh, this feature is not off the table, it just costs money. So when we're ready to spend that money, then we can go back and add that feature. So the ability to dream big, but then also put some numbers to it, and then that helps you get to a decision as well.
And the other thing too, kind of about that, is that you're saying that going through the process of the ideation helped inform the development and what you actually ended up developing. So
yes.
Being able to go through and see all that information and see and define those features well enough to know what they could cost.
Yep. Which was fantastic.
So I think we are getting towards the end of our webinar. If you're still with us, thank you. If you would like to learn more, MentorMate, on our website, we have a lot of different resources that you can go take a look at. We've got ebooks, and we've got different blog posts from developers, solutions architects, a lot from our strategy and marketing. So we're a wealth of information for you if you want to go check that out. And lastly, we will just finish up with some questions. So a few questions have come in. So the one that I have here is, why was the hyper-concentrated time frame of rapid ideation helpful? And this is for you, Molly.
Well, for our team specifically, which was different, was that people were global and international. So we had to fly them in for just a couple days, and we wanted to get those voices in the room, and so we did the 2 days right in a row. We were able to walk out with sort of our phased approach. And then what happened before and after was really helpful too, is that the people local came in, and Kyle really took some time to get to know our process and what we were trying to do before the rapid ideation. And then after the rapid ideation, we were also invited back in the MentorMate. We also had a bunch of calls just sort of confirming what we had heard and what we were doing. So it was really helpful. We had a pretty specific timeline too. So I think Kyle has always been trying to sort of push us a little bit faster so that we could get to that MVP at a better time frame.
Great. I've got another one here. So someone has already started a software project. Is it too late to run a rapid ideation session? I would say that the answer is generally no, depending on how far into the software project you are. We have had a lot of clients who have started software projects, and then they decide that for whatever reason it's not going well, things are going too slow. That's typically what happens, is that if everything's going well, you're not thinking about doing this type of a thing. So if you are in a situation where you're thinking, maybe I need to do this session, my guess is that something's over budget, or something's taking too long, or you're not getting exactly what you want, you're not getting the feedback, and you're not seeing the results from your partner, or from your other outside partner. So if that is the case, we've had a lot of clients come to us like that, and it's been very beneficial, because what's ended up going through that process has sometimes validated things, and they've said, wow, we're actually we're doing things right, and this is good, and we don't really, we would have come to a lot of the same conclusions, but oftentimes we end up headed down a different path where they say, wow, I didn't really actually realize how confusing our existing product was, or how we were really barking up the wrong tree with this solution. Going through the rapid ideation process allowed them to pivot without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even tens and tens of thousands of dollars, for a relatively small amount of money in a relatively short period of time, that they were able to kind of go through this process and pivot to be to go down the right path. Another question: what are some of the best questions to ask to identify technology requirements? So oftentimes, when it comes to technology, the existing tools is what drives most of the decisions. So we go into a company, and MentorMate is technology agnostic, so we've got teams that span all sorts of different development practices. So we'll go in, and they'll already have a .NET tool in place, or they'll have some sort of a PHP tool, or they've got an existing iOS application. Maybe they've got a cross-platform Xamarin app, and as a result, it's the existing decisions that were made that drive the future decisions. If you are starting from scratch, then it's all about looking into what the specific needs of the app are. Who are the users? When it comes to mobile, what types of devices do the existing users already use? What geography are you going to be in? If you're in China versus the United States, there's going to be a different makeup of what users are using. So it really comes down to the specific need and the functionality of that tool. Another question that we got: how does rapid ideation help business save money in the long run? So rapid ideation is an upfront cost. Whether you're doing it internal, you've got to bring people into the meetings, and meetings cost time, which is money. Or if you're hiring an outside consultant, that costs money as well. What I can say is that for those clients who choose to not properly define even the first phase of work, what ends up happening is you get to a certain point in development, and then you realize that, oh, we've done this wrong, or we didn't properly think about that, and you end up changing designs, you end up changing interactions. Maybe you realize that the technology that you decided, maybe it's a plugin, or if you are starting from a blank slate, you realize that the technology that you're using wasn't exactly right for the situation. So what ends up happening when you don't do some sort of an upfront plan is you end up spending a lot of money in rework, and you spend more money in lost time and lost efficiencies, which ends up, then you end up in a tough situation where you're over budget and on time and cost, and that's tough. So that's how what is this? It's an ounce of pain, pound of flesh, or there's something like that. So yeah, it's all about preparation. So thank you for your great questions. It's been a pleasure speaking to you today. Hopefully, if you do have any further questions, you can reach out to myself, kyle.simmons@mentormate.com, if you have any questions. I can't speak for Molly if she wants to answer more questions.
Thank you.
But thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great day.